Okay, now I had intended to end the series of competitive politics versus democracy with part 3, but I became aware that I really hadn't defined the stark differences between competitive politics and democracy because of how they define democracy that is, they say is formed by competitive politics. And this didn't become apparent to me until I answered a question about constitutionalism. And the way I answered the question about constitutionalism is there's no such thing as constitutionalism, because what they're trying to say is that a constitution is a governing system. A lot of people today say constitutional democracy, constitutional republic, and even in Britain, they call it a constitutional monarchy or something like that. And none of those things is true. The reason why is because to constitute means to form or assemble. That's the definition of constitute. You form something or assemble something. And the only thing formed and assembled by the Constitution of the United States is Congress as a legislative assembly of the states, which is governed by legislative processes to reach a majority consensus. So when you think about what is necessary in a constitution, what you realize immediately is that a constitution actually is only the formalization of a participation versus compliance agreement, which establishes the benefits, privileges, rights of participation in decision making, and cost of membership in the union. So the part there that's important is the participation in decision making. Okay? Why is that important? Because every member of the union or association or club or whatever you form needs to understand their rights to participate in all the decisions that are made for that association or union or whatever. And with the states, it was a very important part of them becoming a union, because when they declared their independence from the state of Great Britain, they did it to each of them to have the power of a free and independent state to make the decisions, to have the full power to make the decisions of a free and independent state. Let's put it that way. to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things that an independent state may by right do. Okay? That's what they each got when they declared their independence. But they weren't a union. They were Confederates, yes, because they were states joined in a common cause against a common enemy. But they had no way to act as the union. And what I mean by that is, who makes the decisions for all aspects of the war, the Revolutionary War with England? Who? How are those decisions made by the states collectively, and how will they pay for the cost of the war? How will they divide that cost of the war between the states? So they needed a participation versus compliance agreement to specify what their union would entail, meaning, is this just an agreement to fight together and for the war, but there's no other agreement past that, so we build a system to determine how to work together and make collective decisions, and how to pay for it, for the war. And then everything else, each state does on their own, which is what they could have done, definitely. But would that have been a union? No. That wouldn't have been a union. It would have been a contract and a treaty between the states. But when it came to other stuff like commerce and alliances and stuff like that, there wouldn't have been any agreement. And there still wouldn't have been any way of determining how they would interact with each other, even for interstate commerce and stuff like that. So that's why they decided to be a union. Now, when you talk about democracy and republic principles and stuff like that, that's not that's how you assemble and how it functions, how the assembly functions to make collective decisions. Okay? So, what does it govern? It governs collective decision making. That's what Congress, the states assembled in Congress does. It manages how the states make collective decisions to act as the union. So when they made an agreement for how to assemble, how to distribute suffrage between the states, and how to reach a majority consensus, that was determined that they would do it as a democracy, where each state was equal in the Union and each state had equal suffrage in the Union. Okay? So the Constitution at that time, which was the Articles of Confederation, was the formalization of that agreement. And that part of the agreement for how to form the Union and how to act as a Union is not amendable. Just totally not amendable. Because that is the framework for how the states participated in the collective, which is the Union. Okay? So when you go to the Constitution, did that change? Absolutely not. The state is still a democracy. The only difference is that the states were mandated to be republics themselves. Okay? Yes, the Constitution added a republican form of government as Article 1, which is assembled in a bicameral legislature to balance the legislative process. That is 100% accurate. But Article 4, Section 4 guarantees all the states in the Union a republican form of government. And in order to form a larger republic or a confederation of republics, all the states have to either be simple or compound republics themselves. That's how they force the states to have to institute a specific assembly for the most numerous legislative branch, which is it has to be an exact representation of the population itself, of each state. And when they form their state delegation to the Federal Assembly, they have to use the same process and qualified electorate to form that. And thus, the Federal Assembly is a confederation of republics in a bicameral legislature where the states are assembled proportionally in the House and as equals in the Senate. The House does the work of identifying and ranking choices and determining the choice that they want to make for any matter. Then that choice has to go to the Senate for concurrence. Why? Because by proportion, the 9 largest states today can pass any measure they want. So the scope, they control, those 9 states control the scope and cost of everything we do, in every decision we make as a bicameral legislature. But it has to go to the Senate, where the states are assembled as equals for concurrence. So when it gets to the Senate, there are 41 states to reject those measures and return them to the House for reconsideration, along with amendments to advise those 9 states what it would be acceptable to gain the concurrence of those 41 smaller states. Okay, so this is just a balanced legislative process. But the Senate assembled as a unicameral legislature, it's still a democracy. And that's still, Articles 2 and 3 came directly from Article 9 of the Articles of Confederation, where they assembled the Supreme Court, where they assembled the executive departments, they determined alliances, they did everything as a democracy through the Committee of the States, which is one representative per state. Okay? And the president at that time was the president of the Committee of the States. They only presided over the proceedings. They didn't get any extra authority or extra vote or anything by being the president. They still had their one vote for their state. And no person could serve as the president more than 1 year in any 3 consecutive years. So they had 13 states, and that means that every state, pretty much, one of their representatives was the president at that time. From the time 1788 till 1778 through 1788. Okay. So these things about how to assemble it, the legislative assembly, and how to operate the legislative assembly, and how to reach a majority consensus of the legislative assembly, and what's a quorum in the legislative assembly in order to discuss and debate these matters, that's all specified. It cannot change. The states are entitled to their representation in suffrage, independent of the other states. They cannot consolidate that representation in suffrage. Cannot. At all. And that's what the vice president is supposed to do as a president of the Senate. He'd tell them, look, you all can be friends, but when it comes time to vote, the votes are independent by state. You can't proxy votes. So there's no way to proxy the votes to consolidate the House and Senate by party affiliation. Now, this is where competitive politics is disqualified as being a democracy. Because in competitive politics, they compete for seats in the House and the Senate in order to determine composition and distribution of suffrage based on party affiliation and control based on majority party affiliation. Okay? There is no control based on assembly in either one of those bodies. Just no. No state has a majority of the proportional assembly in the House. I mean, California only has, I think, 12% of the population. So they're entitled to 12% of the representation in the House. 12%. Okay? So they're the largest state. So that's not a majority. So they can't get what they want. They can influence the House because they're the biggest state. They got the biggest percentage. Without those 9 states, you can't pass anything either because they're a majority in the House. And in the Senate, You can never consolidate the Senate by party affiliation. Never. And in Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States, it tells you exactly that no state without their consent can be denied their equal suffrage in the Senate. Okay, without their consent, they can't be denied. And right now, the states are being denied their equal suffrage in the Senate because they don't get to participate. The Democrats and Republicans have taken their senators, and those senators don't represent their states anymore, they represent their party. Okay? A state like Colorado at one time had one Republican and one Democratic senator. What does that mean? The senators are supposed to be appointed by and directed by the state's legislature, which is supposed to be an assembly of an exact representation of the people of the state assembled in the most numerous legislative branch. So there's no such thing as Republicans and Democrats or proxy in their vote to form majorities by party affiliation. And that's what they're doing. Why are they doing it? Because they want control over policy. And if you didn't even watch the debate, which I didn't, I'm going to waste my time. What you will find is that most of the debate was about each of their policies that they intend to try to put. They have an agenda to put those policies in place while they're president. And they will have their affiliates through their party in the House and the Senate to write legislation that makes those policies. They want to control foreign policy, commerce, every aspect of the decisions that are supposed to be made by the union are now being made by parties. Now, my answer to the question about constitutionalism was that you can't have a democracy unless you have equal participation and equal suffrage. That is the most fundamental definition of democracy. You have to participate as equals, and you have to vote to reach a majority consensus as equals. You have to have an equal vote. That's a democracy. Okay? And a government has to be robust to the cancers of government. And the first cancer of government is improper consolidation. You have mutability, and you have a lack of continuity and stability in your government. And that's what you have to guard against when you design the government. And that's why they chose democracy and a Republican form of government to make the decisions of the collective decisions of the union. And everything is a decision. Even healthcare and all those other things, they're still collective decisions. And the first hurdle they have to get over is they have to rise to the level of collective interest to the states. Meaning, state A and B over here might think that it would be a good idea to have universal health care funded on the federal level. And the other states would be like, that won't work for us because we don't have the same dynamics as you have in your state. So for us, it would be better to deal with that type of a universal health care issue within our state. And in a state like California, it might be a situation where they deal with it in each county and not even as the state as a whole, because they have so much disparity in so many demographic factors that it might not ever make sense to have statewide policies like that. Okay? So you need to be able to connect the people to the policy and the decision making. It has to be collective. And let's get this straight. The people are not governed. The collective decision making of the people is governed. This isn't about the Ten Commandment laws, which are universally understood. Thou shalt not kill, steal, come on. The laws that they make in government are laws to efficiently operate some type of a collective decision for something. Like if you have a water well, who digs the well? How much does it cost? How do you maintain it? And then how much do you pay for it? How do you pay for it? Those are collective decisions that need to be made in government. If you have an interstate highway or high-speed intercontinental rail, that's also a collective decision that needs to be made on the federal level. And if it goes into Mexico and Canada, then we need a treaty. That's also part of that discussion. So competitive politics tries to gain power and control over decision making to make policy. Why? Because they want to make policy in their own interest so that they can benefit from it. Most of those policies have an economic component, which is why they want control over policy. And no, in a collective society, you can't have competitive politics determining the decisions and policy for that collective. So, and it's not, you're not representing the people. And the people don't have the thing that Hamilton said was, does it have a due responsibility to and dependence on the people? And that is the measure of a republic and a democracy. So this is the difference. We cannot have competitive politics to assemble and operate our government. That must end. Thank you.